Host Matt Van Pelt, and with me today are Full Scope IT's CTO Dan Wolk, CEO Bob Priest, and Business Solutions Advisor Brian Amadeo. Hello, gentlemen.
How you doing?
Hello, Matt.
All right. Bob, how are you today?
I'm doing great, man. I'm doing awesome.
Perfect,
Loving life.
Perfect. Dan, how are you joining us from your vacation?
Just fine. Nice
All right.
sunny day here.
Perfect.
Looks like you're getting a little bit of sun there, Dan.
A little bit.
Good. Brian, how are you today?
I'm excellent, Matt. Thank you very much for asking.
All right, great. We will get started with today's agenda. The buzzword of the day.
Breaking down the buzzword.
More of a buzz phrase, cybersecurity threats. Can anybody give us a definition of a cybersecurity threat? Dan, what do you got for us?
Well, I guess I'd say that's when there's a known vulnerability that's actively being exploited. So, something you really need to protect yourself against. The front door's unlocked and wide open, and you gotta close it and put that deadbolt in before you go to bed.
So, what differentiates it from a vulnerability or a risk?
A vulnerability is something that we know might be a problem, but we don't really know that anybody's actively attacking it. Whereas once it escalates to a threat, then you know that it's really being actively attacked, and if you don't protect yourself, you're going to get attacked. Whereas a risk is just more general, like if you use email, you know that there's things people try to do against email systems, but that doesn't mean stop using email. So it's really sort of a sliding scale from risk to vulnerability to threat.
Is the vulnerability like when we've seen somebody's firewall login page exposed to the internet or something along that line where it shouldn't be?
Right. And there's usually a period of time which seems to get shorter and shorter where known vulnerabilities turn into threats.
Longer it's out there.
What is the definition of a threat actor?
Threat actor would simply be whoever the bad guys are that are trying to attack you over the internet or through the computer somehow. And it's more of a generalized term because nowadays we don't always know where where the threats are originating from and where the attacks are originating from. Very often they can be assigned to certain groups, but more often than that, we just don't know where it's coming from.
Why is it especially important for businesses to protect themselves against cybersecurity threats?
Just like the door being open example, you don't want people to steal your stuff or damage your stuff. And I say stuff, but we rely so heavily on computers these days to run our businesses and to manage our business relationships and our financial relationships, that unwarranted access to our computer systems can really cause a lot of damage.
I mean, business has enough risk as it is, right? So we're constantly making decisions on a daily basis to offset those things. The last thing we need is the opportunity for someone just to take it away all in one fair swoop.
Can we give some maybe some examples of some top cybersecurity threats?
Well, that's a great question. Let me look at what we wrote down there, because there was such a, we had prepared a really good list, but off the top of my head, it seems like these days email is really the number one way that businesses are being attacked these days. And mostly that's done through phishing, where there's emails sent pretending to be somebody that they're not, asking employees to access certain systems or send money, and they use a lot of methods to try to convince employees to do these things. They're very, very convincing. There's a long history of trying to convince people to do things they wouldn't normally do, and I'm sure there's some really great car salesmen out there, but they use a lot of these like salesman techniques to convince you that you're doing the right thing and that you want to just keep moving forward. The other big risks are vulnerabilities within the computer systems themselves, where either certain web pages or even certain SMS messages to our cell phones can trigger the devices to do things that we didn't really want them to do. Sorry, go ahead.
All I was going to say is, on all the electronic sides of things, or the digital side of things, it's just a matter of how good that person is to get through something. But as soon as you press on the human factor, right, that's why the email is so successful. It's because we get into routines, we rush, we do things, we're the variable, right? And I think that's why that's such a successful threat, unfortunately. But we all are able to do that. I mean, I even clicked on one of our campaigns myself after starting here recently, or then, I shouldn't say recently, but right after starting here. And I was like, oh my gosh, I'm the guy that has to show his face in an IT organization after clicking on one of those.
You bring up the campaigns, and that's. I know the next question is going to be, well, what do we do about these things? And on the human side, we do training, and we run these campaigns where we pretend to be the bad guys, and send messages with links that people shouldn't be clicking on. But it doesn't really do any harm. We just track who's not fully paying attention, so that we can then say, here's some good reading material that'll help you identify these threats later on. And that's exactly why we do them. We don't expect everybody to always be perfect. These threats are evolving. People get better at their convincing language. Years ago, there were Nigerian scams, which were all in very, very broken English, and you'd say to yourself, how could anybody possibly even reply to these emails? They just sound so ridiculous. But nowadays, they don't sound so ridiculous anymore. They're in very grammatically correct English and well formatted with good, clean logos, and they copy the actual companies that they're pretending to be very thoroughly. And with AI able to write good, clean English for you, you can just ask your AI, write me a spoof email from this company, and they'll do a very good job at it.
One thing that I keep thinking about, and I know that social engineering is kind of like similar, I think, right, to the phishing. One thing that keeps popping in my head is obviously we're wanting to like educate people who have businesses and are a part of businesses, but it's kind of scary how like businesses are attacked, but then also there's also like a personal element where I heard a story and it ended really horribly. So I'm not going to go into detail, but basically there's this father now who helps educate parents because even kids are falling into these attacks because they think that they're just talking to like other kids their age online. And there was this father's son thought he was just talking to like a girl that went to another high school in another town. This person even had mutual friends because the scammer went so far as to add all the friends and really create this profile, and then basically told the kid, I need $10,000 by the end of the night. And a bunch of horrible stuff happened in between. And so now this dad goes around and tries to educate parents on how to like have their kids avoid. But what would you suggest, like on a personal level and a business level? Like, because it's like in my head, you don't want everyone to be fearful of everyone where they're avoiding human interaction and stuff like that. But is there something that you would suggest to know if like that LinkedIn person is real, or even on a personal level for families to know, like, how do you verify when they go so deep into making themselves look so real online?
Wow, that's a great question. These are all very personal decisions when you're talking about, like your kids and your personal accounts. And some people just take the stance that nothing is trustworthy, and they don't join social media networks, or they just join them just so that they can read stuff that their friends are posting, but they won't post anything themselves. Verification that you're really dealing with the person you think you are is very difficult, because the power of the social networks is that you can reach out to people all across the entire planet that you may not have seen for years, or that you may never even meet. These technologies have always existed. They just used to be just for like communication, like you could have a pen pal. But the speed of the mail sort of dulled the edge of what you could really do in those situations. But now everything's so fast that somebody could ask you for $10,000 and you could send it to them a second later. I guess I would just say, and try to give things time. Don't be so reactive, because you can get into trouble very, very quickly, and try to slow things down and make sure you're really talking to who you think you're talking to, and that the situation really is what you think it is before acting.
Mm-hmm. And I guess
we're all
Go
ahead, Michaela.
No, I was just going to say, I guess too, from a, maybe not from a personal standpoint, but from a business standpoint, if someone is questioning, like that's probably where they could lean on, like if Full Scope was their provider, whoever was their provider, send them that email, like to have them verify before they're just like making that rash decision, right? That's where we would probably come in and be able to help them know if something's real or not, or at least protect them.
We have our own procedures that we follow for verification. We won't just simply take an email that says reset my password so I can access all the business systems. We go, oh yeah, sure. We don't do that. We will verify who they are. I don't really want to go into the specific procedures, but they could involve making phone calls to one or multiple parties at the business to verify things. And we try to maintain business relationships with our customers so that we actually know who we're talking to. It's not just a random voice over the phone.
Yeah.
The first time I was exposed to one of our clients that had asked for, like, they were now, say, promoted to a new position that managed, and I need access to this. Can you please now give me access to these things? And I was like, I'm sure that's not a problem. And then when I saw the process that we followed to make that verification, like, we're not taking that person's word for it. There's a procedure here. And I was like, that makes sense. And I'm glad that we do that. And that was a big important thing for us to be able to do.
Yeah, there's a few MSPs that didn't get ahead of that luckily paved the way for us to make sure that we could put these procedures in place. Luckily, so
That's how you learn.
yep.
All right. Well, we will consider this week's buzzword broken down. Thanks to the panel. We'll move on to our next segment, the tech tip.
Well, if it isn't a tech tip.
This week's tech tip is understand the cybersecurity landscape. Stay ahead of cybersecurity threats by staying informed. Familiarize yourself with common terms and threats, such as scammers, hackers, phishing emails, malware, ransomware, spoofers, and DDoS attacks. Anybody want to expand on that?
Well, we covered a lot of that just now. I don't really want to go through and give a definition of everything you put in there, but that does go to show that there are a lot of things you need to know about, there's a lot of news articles these days, online, TV, print, wherever you look, there's articles about computers and computer security. And it's a good idea to read them, even if you think they're boring, because they're generally being written because these are important issues to know about. And to understand that, when a phone call comes in from an unknown number, or even sometimes it may be a known number, that there could be issues with this, and that anytime you're interacting with people through technology, it's not the same as having your friend stand in front of you and shake your hand. You really need to understand what the technology can be doing to alter the reality you think you're experiencing online.
For more information on cybersecurity threats, check out our most recent blog post, how Full Scope IT can help protect your business against cybersecurity threats. And now, on to our story of the week.
This is the story of the week.
Listen up!
Today's story of the week comes from TheVerge.com, and it is titled, Microsoft says June Outlook outages were a DDoS attack. Thoughts? No thoughts? Anybody read the article?
I'm reading it right now.
I read the article, and I just want to say I really like The Verge. They have like a good combination of technology news and product evaluations, and they always, since they started, have put a really strong focus on writing clearly and making everything understandable to everyone, and I appreciate that about them. And the article just goes to show everyone's vulnerable to some attack. Microsoft is one of the biggest on the internet, and if the services that they're providing can be brought down by what seems to have been a fairly small group of attackers, you need to understand what the threats are against you, because if you're relying on your systems being up and running all the time in order to keep your business moving forward, you need to have good plans in place for when they aren't working.
I heard a statistic recently, and I'm going to mess the number up, but maybe you can verify this, Dan. But I was told that Microsoft gets hit like 8 million times a day. It's an unbelievable number, the amount of attacks that they're, because think about how much service they provide, right? So it's not that crazy when you think about it. But it was, and when I heard the number, I was like, is that even possible? And I'm like, yeah, I guess it is, when you've got all these bots just bombarding it constantly. But it was incredible, just the amount of
Yeah, I don't know the statistics exactly, but like there's when you work in a regulated industry like banking or insurance, there used to be a requirement to report all the attacks, and the numbers just become staggering, and there's no way to report them all. So I wouldn't be surprised if the number was that high. There's very large botnets out there, and there's a lot of people who are really prodding the big services like Microsoft for vulnerabilities to try to break in. So, but this particular attack last month was a DDoS attack, and simply designed to overwhelm the systems so that the real customers couldn't access their data. And it's a really effective attack because it costs Microsoft and their customers a lot of revenue in downtime.
Wow.
Yeah,
So
remember-
wait, I don't know if this is an ignorant question, but when a attack like that goes on, is whoever's doing it trying to hold money over Microsoft's head so that they pay them, or they just like bring it down for fun?
That was one of the things that was not really specified in the article, and I haven't seen it mentioned anywhere. It sounds like in this case they were doing this for a political agenda, and that if they could bring down Microsoft even for a few hours, and even if it was only for 20 or 30,000 people globally out of the hundreds of millions of active users, people were going to talk about them, and eventually people would talk about who they are and what they stand for, and sometimes that's what a DDoS attack is about, and sometimes it is to extort money, and sometimes it's just to do damage to somebody they don't like.
A lot of agendas.
Yeah.
Yeah, I remember there was a couple of entertainment, commerce. There was a lot of major sites get hit for that reason, just to take them down, just to interrupt business continuity.
So once again, the next question is, what can you do? And if Microsoft couldn't do anything, it seems like it's hopeless for everyone. But really, Microsoft did a lot, and Microsoft not only deflects 8 million little attacks a day, but they're very good at deflecting very large attacks, and they have massive teams that work on protecting themselves and also mitigating the attacks when they do happen. And it could have been much worse, and more of their services could have gone down for a much larger number of users or for a much longer period of time. So, Microsoft didn't just sit there and say, "Oh, we're under attack. Let's wait for it to end." They clearly had a strong defense, and what we can do as Microsoft partners and as Microsoft customers is to just make sure that there's plans in place for how your business can keep going forward even when these problems come about.
I think that speaks to something we see a lot, where we know these things are going to happen, right? It's not that we do as much as we can to reduce those risks, right, or to prevent as much as we can through other tools or education. But what we do on a daily basis when those things happen, right, how we can help that business continuity maintain and let people still run their organizations despite some of these things, or reduce that amount of time that they're down, say. I think that's the thing we, as an MSP, right, that we see a lot or that we deal with, because they are going to happen. I think a lot of people believe that, if everything's in place, nothing's going to happen. I think the idea is that we reduce that risk, and then we give you the best possible chance of being back up and running as quickly as possible. I think that's something that is important for people to understand too. We don't just put this amazing shield around you and it's good, you're 100%, right? There's always some level of vulnerability, but we can greatly reduce it, and then we can greatly increase the chance of you being back up and running and conducting business. So anyway, I think that's the big part of this. Not necessarily what we're doing to prevent, but what we're doing to, like you said, Microsoft did a lot of things during that time. They didn't sit around waiting for it to just end. Right? They did what they could, which was probably all hands on deck at that point.
Yeah, and at a smaller level, we activate a lot of defenses on customer systems that may not ever be activated because they may not ever be attacked, or they may repel hundreds or thousands of attacks every month silently because they're doing their job. You don't need to know that they did anything because they just did it.
Exactly.
Well, that's a wrap on today's episode. Thank you for joining us for this week's edition of the Full Scope Cybercast, Safeguarding the Digital Frontier. I would also like to thank today's guests and let you know that we will be back next week for another episode. So until then, stay behind your firewall.
Have a good one, guys.